The summer heat was unforgiving that Tuesday afternoon. Inside the small auto repair shop on the corner of 5th and Main Street, the overhead fans did little more than push hot air from one end of the garage to the other. The smell of motor oil and rubber hung thick in the air, mixing with the occasional breeze that carried the scent of fresh-cut grass from the park across the street. Jerome had been working since 7 that morning, and his blue coveralls were already stained dark with sweat and grease. At 32 years old, he'd been fixing cars for nearly a decade, and he was good at it. Real good. But it wasn't the career he'd dreamed of as a kid. Life had a way of taking you down roads you never planned to travel. He was under the hood of a silver pickup truck when he heard the unmistakable sound of a struggling engine. It was a sound he'd learned to recognize over the years, like a doctor hearing a patient's cough and already knowing something was wrong. The vehicle was fighting to stay alive, each rotation of the engine more labored than the last. Jerome slid out from under the truck and stood up, squinting against the bright sunlight streaming through the open garage door. A dark blue Honda rolled into the parking lot, and even from a distance he could see the small cloud of smoke trailing from the exhaust. The car lurched forward in uneven jerks before finally coming to a stop near the entrance. The driver's door opened, and a young woman stepped out. She couldn't have been more than 28 or 29, with light brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was flushed, whether from the heat or from stress Jerome couldn't tell. Maybe both. She wore a wrinkled work shirt with a name tag that he couldn't quite read from where he stood, and her shoulders sagged with the weight of what looked like a very long day. Before Jerome could walk over to greet her, the back door of the Honda opened, and a small boy climbed out, clutching a stuffed animal that might have once been gray, but had been loved into a sort of dingy white. The kid looked about 5, maybe 6 years old, with a mop of brown hair and eyes that seemed too tired for someone so young. "Can I help you?" Jerome called out, wiping his hands on a red rag he kept tucked in his pocket. The woman looked up, and Jerome saw it then, that look he'd seen too many times before. It was the look of someone who was hanging on by a thread, trying to keep it together, trying to be strong. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and when she spoke, her voice cracked just a little. "I hope so. My car's been making this noise for a few weeks now, and today it just started smoking and making this horrible grinding sound. I barely made it here." She glanced back at her son, who was now sitting on the curb, making his stuffed elephant hop along the concrete. "I was on my way to pick him up from daycare when it happened." Jerome nodded and grabbed his clipboard from the workbench. "Let's take a look." "Can you pop the hood for me?" As the woman reached back into the car to pull the hood release, Jerome noticed her hands were shaking. He pretended not to see it. Some people didn't like their worry being acknowledged. It made it too real. The hood lifted with a creak, and Jerome propped it open with the metal rod. He leaned in, immediately spotting several problems. This wasn't going to be a quick fix or a cheap one. He checked the transmission fluid, dark and gritty when it should have been bright red. He examined the brake pads through the wheel spokes, worn down to almost nothing, and that smell, that distinct sweet smell, told him the radiator was leaking coolant. "How long has it been since you had any work done on this?" Jerome asked, not looking up from the engine. I'm not really sure. I bought it used about 3 years ago. I've kept up with the oil changes when I could afford them, but that's about it." Her voice was quiet now, almost apologetic. Jerome stood up and met her eyes. They were green, he noticed, and filled with the kind of exhaustion that came from working too hard for too long. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You've got multiple issues here. The transmission is on its last leg. Your brake pads are gone, and you're leaking coolant from the radiator. Plus, I need to check a few other things before I can give you a full picture." He watched her face fall, watched the way she bit her lower lip and blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. Her hand went to her purse, and she pulled out a worn wallet, the kind that had been taped together on one corner. "How much are we talking?" she asked, though Jerome could tell she already knew the answer would be more than she had. "For everything? You're looking at somewhere around $2,000, maybe a bit more depending on what else I find." The woman's face went pale. She looked down at her wallet, then over at her son, who was now making engine noises as he pushed his elephant along the ground like it was a race car. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. "I can't afford that. I don't even have enough for the diagnostic fee right now. I was hoping it would just be something small." Her voice broke on the last word, and she covered her mouth with her hand, taking a deep breath to compose herself. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for wasting your time. I just don't know what to do. I need this car to get to work." I work 2 jobs, and if I can't get there, I can't pay rent. And I can't lose my apartment because then where would we go? She was talking fast now, the words tumbling out like a dam had broken. Jerome stood there, his grease-stained hands still holding the clipboard, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. He'd seen desperate people before. This business showed you humanity at its most vulnerable, but something about this moment felt different. "Mommy, are we going to have to walk everywhere again?" The little boy called out from his spot on the curb. His voice was matter-of-fact, like walking everywhere was just something that happened sometimes. The woman's face crumpled at her son's words. "No, baby. We'll figure something out. We always do." But Jerome could see she didn't believe her own words. He looked at the kid who had now stood up and was walking over to them. The boy's shoes were worn, with a small hole forming near the toe of his left sneaker. His shirt was clean but faded from too many washes, and his pants were just a little too short, like he'd grown since they were bought and there hadn't been money for new ones yet. "Is our car going to be okay?" the boy asked, looking up at Jerome with wide, hopeful eyes. Jerome crouched down to the kid's level. "What's your name, buddy?" "Timothy, but everyone calls me Tim." "Well, Tim, I'm going to do my best to get your car running again. How does that sound?" The boy's face lit up. "Really, that would be so cool. I told Mommy that we just needed to find someone who knew how to fix it real good." Jerome felt something twist in his chest. He stood back up and looked at the woman, who had her hand over her mouth again, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Give me a minute," Jerome said. "Let me talk to my boss." He walked back into the shop, past the other bays where 2 other mechanics were working. He found Ray, the shop owner, in the small office that smelled like coffee and cigarettes. Even though Ray had quit smoking 5 years ago, "Ray, I need to talk to you about something." Ray looked up from the stack of invoices he was sorting through. He was in his 60s with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from years of hard work. "What's up?" "That Honda that just came in. Single mother struggling. Car needs about $2,000 in work. She's got nothing." Ray sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Jerome, we've been through this before. We're running a business, not a charity. I feel for her, I really do, but I've got bills to pay too." "I know. I'm not asking you to do it for free. What if I cover some of the parts cost myself and I'll do the labor after hours? My own time, no charge to the shop." Ray studied him for a long moment. "You got a soft heart, you know that? One of these days it's going to get you in trouble." "Maybe, but I've got to do something. You should see that kid out there. They've already been walking everywhere once before. They're barely holding on." Ray drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking. Finally, he nodded. "All right. You can use the shop after hours and I'll give you the parts at cost. But you're covering at least half the parts and all the labor is your time." "Deal." "Thank you, Ray." Jerome walked back out to where the woman and her son were standing by the car. She had composed herself, wiped away the tears, and put on that brave face that parents wear when they're trying to shield their kids from their own fear. "Okay, here's what I can do," Jerome said. "I can fix everything that needs fixing, but I'm going to need a few days. I'll do it after hours on my own time. You'll only need to pay for parts, and I've worked out a deal to get those at a lower price. It'll still be a few $100s, but it's better than $2,000. The woman stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. "What? Why would you do that?" "You don't even know me," Jerome shrugged. "Let's just say I know what it's like when life keeps knocking you down. Sometimes you need someone to help you back up." She shook her head in disbelief, tears starting again. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "It's enough," Jerome said. "Now, I'm going to need you to leave the car here. Do you have someone who can give you a ride?" "I'll call my neighbor. She should be able to help." The woman pulled out an old cell phone with a cracked screen. "When should I come back?" "Give me 3 days. I'll call you when it's ready. Oh, and I need your number." After exchanging information, Jerome watched as the woman and her son waited by the curb for their ride. The little boy, Tim, waved at him enthusiastically before climbing into a beat-up station wagon that pulled up 20 minutes later. As Jerome watched them drive away, his coworker Danny walked up beside him. "You going soft on me?" Danny asked with a smirk. "Maybe," Jerome admitted. "Or maybe I'm just trying to be the person I needed when I was that kid's age." Danny didn't push further. He knew Jerome's story. Most people at the shop did. It wasn't something Jerome talked about much, but it was there in the background, shaping everything he did. That night, after the shop closed at 6, Jerome stayed behind. He rolled the blue Honda into his bay and got to work. The radio played old rock songs in the background, and the familiar rhythm of wrenches turning and parts moving calmed his mind. This was his meditation, his way of making sense of the world. As he worked, Jerome couldn't stop thinking about the look in that little boy's eyes. That hope, that trust that things would work out. Jerome had lost that trust when he was 8 years old, the night his life changed forever. He'd spent the next decade bouncing through the foster care system, never quite finding a place where he fit, never having someone who chose him. He understood what it meant to be alone, to feel like the world was too big and you were too small. And maybe that's why he couldn't walk away from that woman and her son, because he knew what it felt like to need help and have no one answer. 3 hours later, covered in even more grease and with his back aching, Jerome called it a night. He'd made good progress. The brake pads were replaced and he'd started on the transmission. Tomorrow night he'd tackle the radiator. As he locked up the shop and climbed into his own truck, Jerome felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. For years he'd just been going through the motions, working, going home to an empty apartment, sleeping, and starting all over again. But tonight felt different. Tonight, he felt like he mattered to someone, even if they barely knew him. He didn't know it yet, but that broken-down Honda and the people it carried would change his life in ways he never could have imagined. The next morning, Jerome woke up with his back screaming at him. He'd stayed at the shop until almost midnight, and his body was reminding him that he wasn't 20 anymore. But as he made his morning coffee in his small kitchen, he found himself thinking about that blue Honda and the family it belonged to. There was something about the whole situation that had gotten under his skin. His apartment was quiet, like it always was. Just him and the hum of the refrigerator. The walls were bare except for a single photograph hanging in the living room, a picture of his parents taken long before he was born. They looked so young in that photo, so full of life. Jerome barely remembered them anymore. Time had a way of fading even the most important memories. He shook off the heavy thoughts and got ready for work. The summer sun was already beating down by the time he pulled into the shop parking lot at 6:45. Ray was already there, unlocking the front door. "Morning," Ray called out. "How'd it go last night with that Honda?" "Good progress. Should have it done by tomorrow night if everything goes smooth." Ray nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "You know, you remind me of myself when I was younger. Always trying to save the world, one car at a time. I'm not trying to save the world, just helping out where I can." "That's how it starts," Ray said with a chuckle, disappearing into his office. The day moved like most days at the shop. A steady stream of vehicles with various problems. A minivan with a busted AC. A sedan with mysterious rattling sounds. A truck that wouldn't start. Jerome worked methodically through each one, his hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Around lunchtime, something unexpected happened. The front door chimed and Jerome looked up from the engine he was working on to see the woman from yesterday walking in. She was carrying a brown paper bag and had young Tim with her. The boy's face lit up when he saw Jerome. "Hi, remember me? I'm Tim," the boy called out, running over with the kind of energy only kids seem to have in the middle of a hot summer day. "Hey buddy, what are you doing here?" The woman walked over looking a bit embarrassed. "I hope we're not bothering you, I know you're working. I just wanted to bring you lunch as a thank you. It's not much, just some sandwiches I made, and Tim really wanted to see the shop." Jerome wiped his hands on his rag. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to. You're doing something incredibly kind for us, and I needed you to know how much it means." Her eyes were sincere, and Jerome could see she meant every word. Danny Wolf whistled from across the shop. "Jerome's got a lunch date." "Shut it, Danny," Jerome said, but he was smiling. He turned back to the woman. "Come on, let's go sit in the break room. It's got AC at least." The break room was nothing fancy. Just a small space with a table, a few chairs, a microwave, and a refrigerator that had seen better days. But it was cool, and right now that's all that mattered. Jerome opened the paper bag and found 2 thick sandwiches wrapped in plastic wrap, some chips, and a couple of cookies. "This looks great, thank you." Tim climbed up on one of the chairs, swinging his legs. "Mommy makes the best sandwiches. She puts extra mayo just how I like it." The woman smiled at her son. "Actually, I made these ones without too much mayo because I didn't know how you like them." "These are perfect," Jerome said, taking a bite. And they were. Simple turkey and cheese, but made with care. It had been a long time since anyone had made him lunch. As they ate, Tim started asking questions. Lots of questions. "How do cars work? What's the loudest car you ever heard? Do you know how to fix race cars? Have you ever been in a race? What's your favorite car?" Jerome answered each one patiently and found himself actually enjoying the conversation. The kid was curious and bright, the kind of child who soaked up information like a sponge. "Tim, honey, let him eat," the woman said gently. "I'm sorry, he's at that age where he asks about everything." "It's fine. I don't mind. Curiosity is a good thing." Jerome looked at Tim. "You know what? After I finish eating, if your mom says it's okay, I can show you the car I'm working on. Not yours, another one. You can see how some of the parts work." Tim's eyes went wide. "Really? Mom, can I? Please?" She hesitated, and Jerome could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was weighing whether this was safe, whether she could trust him. It was the kind of caution a single parent learned to have. "I'll be right there the whole time," Jerome added. "And I'll make sure he doesn't touch anything dangerous. Just looking and learning." Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but you listen to him, Tim. If he says don't touch something, you don't touch it, understood?" "I promise." Tim practically bounced in his seat. After they finished eating, Jerome led them back out to the shop floor. He brought them over to an older pickup truck he'd been working on that morning, one that was in a safe state to show a kid. He explained about the engine, how the pistons moved, how the spark plugs created the fire that made everything work. Tim hung on every word, asking follow-up questions that showed he was really paying attention. The woman stood back watching her son with a soft expression Jerome couldn't quite read. It was something like sadness mixed with gratitude, with maybe a hint of longing for something. "He doesn't usually warm up to people this fast," she said quietly, coming to stand beside Jerome while Tim peered at the engine from a safe distance. "He's usually pretty shy around strangers." "Kids are good judges of character," Jerome said. "At least that's what I've heard." She laughed softly. "I hope so." She paused, then extended her hand. "I realized I never properly introduced myself yesterday. I'm Lisa." Jerome shook her hand. Her grip was firm, the kind that came from working hard. "Jerome, nice to officially meet you." "Jerome," she repeated. "That's a good name, strong." They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, watching Tim examine the truck with intense concentration. "Can I ask you something?" Lisa said, her voice hesitant. "Why are you really doing this, helping us, I mean? People don't usually go out of their way like this, not for strangers." Jerome thought about how to answer that. He could give her the simple version, the easy explanation, or he could tell her the truth. He decided on something in between. "I grew up in foster care," he said, keeping his eyes on Tim. "Bounced around from place to place after my parents died in a fire. I was 8, and I remember what it felt like to need help and not have anyone step up. I remember what it felt like to be invisible, like my problems were too much for anyone to want to deal with. So when I see someone struggling, especially a kid involved, I guess I just can't walk away." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. When Jerome finally looked at her, he saw tears pooling in her eyes again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry that happened to you. It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt less, does it?" Jerome was surprised by her perception. Most people offered empty platitudes when they heard about his past. She seemed to actually understand that some wounds never fully healed. "No," he admitted, "it doesn't." "Tim's father left when he was 2, Lisa said suddenly, as if Jerome's honesty had opened a door for her own. "Just up and decided he didn't want to be a dad anymore. Didn't want the responsibility. I've been doing it alone ever since. And it's hard. Really hard. Some days I feel like I'm failing at everything. Can't afford to buy him new shoes when he needs them. Can't take him to do fun things other kids get to do. Can't even keep my car running. Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and Jerome saw her quickly wipe at her eyes before Tim could notice. You're not failing, Jerome said firmly. That kid over there? He's happy, he's curious, he's polite. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because he's got a good mom who's doing her best. And sometimes your best is enough even when it doesn't feel like it. Lisa looked at him with an expression of such raw gratitude that it made Jerome's chest tighten. Thank you, she said. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Tim came running back over. That was so cool. Can I see more? Jerome glanced at the clock on the wall. His lunch break was almost over. I've got to get back to work, buddy, but tell you what. When I'm done fixing your car, if your mom says it's okay, I can show you some more stuff. Deal? Deal. Tim stuck out his hand for a handshake, very serious and grown up. Jerome shook it, trying not to smile at how earnest the kid was. As Lisa and Tim prepared to leave, Ray emerged from his office. He took one look at the scene and raised an eyebrow at Jerome, but didn't say anything. Just gave a slight nod like he understood. I'll call you when the car's ready, Jerome told Lisa. Should be tomorrow evening if all goes well. Thank you again. For everything. The car, the lunch break, showing Tim the engine. You've been so kind to us. No problem. Drive safe getting home. After they left, Danny sauntered over with a grin. So who was that? The owner of the Honda I'm fixing. Uh-huh. And she just happened to bring you lunch? It was a thank you, that's all. Right. A thank you. Jerome, man, when was the last time you went on a date? This wasn't a date. And I don't see how that's any of your business. Danny held up his hands. Hey, I'm just saying she seems nice. The kid seems great. And you looked happier in the last hour than I've seen you look in the year I've been working here. Jerome didn't respond. He just went back to work, trying to ignore the fact that Danny might have had a point. Not about the date thing, that was ridiculous, but about being happy. There had been something nice about having lunch with Lisa and Tim, about showing the kid how an engine worked, about feeling like he mattered to someone, even in a small way. That night, Jerome stayed late at the shop again. He worked on the Honda with renewed focus, replacing the radiator, finishing up the transmission work, double-checking everything to make sure it would run smooth. As he worked, he found himself thinking about the conversation at lunch. Lisa was raising a kid alone, working 2 jobs, barely scraping by. It reminded him of some of the foster parents he'd had, the ones who actually cared, who were trying their best with limited resources. The difference was that Lisa was Tim's real mom. The bond between them was obvious. That kid knew he was loved even if money was tight. Around 11 that night, Jerome tightened the last bolt and stood back to admire his work. The Honda looked the same on the outside, but underneath, everything was solid now. He turned the key in the ignition and the engine purred to life. No smoke, no grinding, no struggling. Just a smooth, healthy sound. There you go, Jerome said to the empty car. Good as new. As he cleaned up his tools and locked the shop for the night, Jerome realized he felt good. Tired but satisfied in a way that fixing cars for money never quite achieved. He'd helped someone who really needed it. He'd made a difference in a kid's life, even if it was just by fixing a car and showing him an engine. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. Hi Jerome, this is Lisa. I just wanted to say thank you again for today. Tim hasn't stopped talking about the truck engine and how nice you were. He asked if you could be his friend. Kids say the sweetest things. Anyway, I hope we didn't take up too much of your lunch break. Have a good night. Jerome read the message twice, then typed back. You didn't take up my time at all. Tell Tim I'd be honored to be his friend. Car should be ready tomorrow. I'll call you when it's done. He hit send before he could overthink it. As he drove home through the quiet streets, Jerome felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel quite so alone. It was strange how much difference a few days could make, how much impact one struggling family and their broken-down car could have. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change in ways that would surprise him. Sometimes the most important moments start small. A car breaking down, a sandwich offered in thanks, a little boy asking questions about engines. These small moments had a way of building into something bigger, something that could fill the empty spaces in a person's heart. Jerome pulled into his apartment complex and sat in his truck for a moment, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. Somewhere out there, Lisa was probably tucking Tim into bed. Somewhere out there, a kid was falling asleep dreaming about car engines and making a new friend. And for the first time in a very long time, Jerome went to bed that night feeling like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. The call came the next evening, just as Jerome had promised. Lisa answered on the second ring, and he could hear the hope in her voice even through the phone. "It's done," Jerome said. "Your car is ready. Runs like a dream now." There was a moment of silence, then he heard her let out a breath she'd probably been holding for days. "Really? It's really fixed? Come by tomorrow morning and see for yourself. Bring Tim if you want. I think he'd get a kick out of seeing the finished product. We'll be there first thing. Jerome, I can't thank you enough. How much do I owe you?" Jerome had already worked out the numbers with Ray. Parts at cost, no labor charges. $450. I know that's still a lot, but it's the best I could do. That's more than fair. That's incredibly generous. I'll bring cash tomorrow. Is 9 o'clock okay? 9 works perfect. That night, Jerome found himself actually looking forward to the next day. It was a strange feeling. Usually his days blended together in a comfortable but unremarkable routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. But lately, things felt different. He felt different. The next morning, Lisa and Tim arrived right at 9. Tim burst through the shop door like a small tornado of excitement, his sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. "Is it ready? Can we see it?" Tim's eyes were bright with anticipation. "It's right over there," Jerome said, pointing to the blue Honda parked in the lot. "Want to do the honors of starting it up?" Tim looked at his mother, who nodded with a smile. Jerome handed the keys to Lisa, and together they walked out to the car. The morning sun was already warm, promising another hot day, but there was a lightness in the air that felt good. Lisa slid into the driver's seat while Tim climbed in beside her. Jerome stood by the open door as she turned the key. The engine came to life immediately, smooth and strong. No sputtering, no smoke, no grinding, just the clean sound of a well-running motor. Lisa's hands gripped the steering wheel, and Jerome watched as tears started rolling down her cheeks. Not sad tears this time, but relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. "It sounds so good," she whispered. "I forgot what it sounded like when it wasn't struggling." "It'll get you where you need to go now," Jerome said. "Just keep up with the regular maintenance, and it should last you a good long while." Lisa turned off the engine and stepped out of the car. Before Jerome knew what was happening, she wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. It caught him off guard. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him like that, with such genuine gratitude. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder. "You have no idea what this means, no idea." Jerome awkwardly patted her back. "It's okay. Just glad I could help." When she pulled away, she was smiling despite the tears. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "It's all there. $450, like you said." Jerome took the envelope and handed it to Ray, who had come out to watch the reunion. Ray counted it quickly and nodded. "You're all set," Ray said to Lisa. "Take care of that car now." "I will. I promise." Tim had gotten out of the car and was standing next to Jerome, looking up at him with an expression that was far too serious for a 5-year-old. "Jerome, can I ask you something?" "Sure, buddy. What's up? Do you have any kids?" The question hit Jerome harder than he expected. "No, I don't." "Oh." Tim seemed to think about this for a moment. "Do you want kids?" "Tim," Lisa said, her cheeks flushing. "That's a very personal question. You can't just ask people things like that." "It's okay," Jerome said, though he wasn't sure it was. The question stirred something in him, something he'd buried a long time ago. "I never really thought about it much, to be honest." Well, if you did have a kid, I bet you'd be a really good dad, Tim said matter-of-factly. You're nice and you know about cars and you don't get mad when people ask lots of questions. Jerome felt his throat tighten. That's a real nice thing to say, thank you. Lisa was looking at her son with a mixture of embarrassment and something else, something softer. Come on, sweetheart. We should let Jerome get back to work. I'm sure he's got other cars to fix. As they started to leave, Tim turned back one more time. Can we come visit you again sometime? I want to learn more about cars. Jerome glanced at Lisa, checking if this was okay with her. She gave a small nod. Sure thing. You're welcome anytime. As he watched them drive away in the Honda that now ran smooth and quiet, Danny appeared at his elbow. You're in trouble, my friend. What are you talking about? That kid is attached to you. And if I'm reading things right, his mom isn't far behind. You're reading things wrong. Am I? Danny grinned. When's the last time you smiled this much? When's the last time you looked forward to coming to work? I've known you for a year and I've never seen you like this. Jerome didn't answer because he didn't know what to say. Danny was wrong. He had to be. This was just about helping someone in need, about fixing a car, about being kind to a kid who reminded him of himself. It wasn't about anything more than that, but over the next few weeks, something shifted. Lisa started bringing Tim by the shop every Saturday morning. It became their routine. She'd buy coffee from the shop down the street, enough for Jerome and Ray and Danny too, and Tim would spend an hour or two watching Jerome work, asking endless questions, handing him tools, learning the names of parts. At first, Jerome told himself they were just being friendly, just showing appreciation for what he'd done, but as the weeks went on, he had to admit that he looked forward to those Saturday mornings more than he wanted to acknowledge. The shop felt different when they were there. Less lonely. More like a place where people belonged. One Saturday in late August, Lisa arrived looking troubled. Tim ran off to show Ray a drawing he'd made of a car engine, leaving Jerome and Lisa alone for a moment. Everything okay? Jerome asked, noticing the tension in her shoulders. Lisa sighed. I got some bad news yesterday. The diner where I work my day shift is closing down. Owner is retiring and selling the building. I've got 2 weeks to find something else. That's rough. I'm sorry. I'll figure it out. I always do. It's just scary, you know? That was my stable income. The night shift at the grocery store doesn't pay enough to cover everything on its own. Jerome wiped his hands on his rag, thinking, you know, Ray's been talking about needing someone to help out in the office. Answer phones, schedule appointments, handle paperwork. It's not glamorous, but it's steady hours and he pays fair. Lisa's eyes widened. Really, you think he'd consider me? I don't have much office experience, but I'm good with people and I learn fast. Let me talk to him. Can't promise anything, but it's worth asking. That evening, after the shop closed, Jerome approached Ray in his office. The older man was going through receipts, squinting at the numbers through his reading glasses. Ray, you got a minute? For you, always. What's on your mind? Remember how you were saying you needed help with the office work? That it was getting to be too much to handle on your own? Ray leaned back in his chair. I remember. Why? Lisa, the woman with the Honda, she's losing her job at the diner. She's looking for work. I think she'd be good at the office stuff. She's organized, she's good with people, and she's reliable. Ray studied Jerome over his glasses. You're really invested in this family, aren't you? I'm just trying to help someone who needs it. Uh-huh. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you light up like a Christmas tree every time they walk through that door? Jerome felt heat rise to his face. It's not like that. Son, I may be old, but I'm not blind. And I'm not judging. That woman seems nice, and that boy is a good kid. If you're happy, I'm happy. Ray paused, tapping his pen on the desk. Tell her to come by Monday morning. I'll interview her properly, but if she's half as good as you say, the job is hers. Thanks, Ray, really. Don't thank me yet. If she can't handle the work, that's on you. Jerome called Lisa that night to tell her the news. He could hear the tears in her voice when she thanked him. Could hear Tim in the background asking what was making Mommy cry. Monday morning came, and Lisa showed up for the interview in a simple dress, her hair neatly pulled back, carrying a folder with references from her previous jobs. She looked nervous but determined. Jerome tried to focus on the truck he was working on, but he kept glancing toward Ray's office, wondering how it was going. After about 30 minutes, Lisa emerged with Ray, both of them smiling. Ray extended his hand and Lisa shook it firmly. Welcome to the team, Ray said. You can start tomorrow if that works for you. Lisa's face broke into the biggest smile Jerome had seen from her. Tomorrow is perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Patterson. You won't regret this. After Ray went back to his office, Lisa practically ran over to Jerome. I got it. I actually got the job. That's great. Congratulations. This is going to change everything. Steady hours, better pay, and Tim can come here after school instead of going to the expensive after-school program. Mr. Patterson said it was fine as long as he doesn't get in the way. Jerome felt something warm spread through his chest. So I guess I'll be seeing you every day now, not just Saturdays. I guess you will. Is that okay? Yeah, Jerome said, and he meant it. That's more than okay. The next few weeks brought a new rhythm to the shop. Lisa proved to be excellent at the office work, bringing an organization to Ray's chaotic filing system that had been needed for years. She answered phones with a friendly efficiency, scheduled appointments without double booking, and even started bringing in homemade cookies once a week that had all the mechanics looking forward to Fridays. Tim would arrive after school each day, doing his homework at the small table in the break room before coming out to watch the mechanics work. He gravitated toward Jerome, always asking if he could help, always eager to learn. One afternoon in September, Jerome was teaching Tim how to check tire pressure when Lisa came out of the office with 2 bottles of water. You two look like you're having fun, she said, handing them each a bottle. Jerome's teaching me how to tell if a tire needs air, Tim said proudly. Did you know you can tell by the way it looks sometimes? If it looks too flat at the bottom, it probably needs more air. I didn't know that. You're learning so much. Tim took a drink of water, then looked up at Jerome with that too serious expression he sometimes got. Jerome, can I tell you something? Sure, buddy. I wish you were my dad. The words came out simple and honest, the way only a child could say something so profound. Jerome froze. Lisa's eyes went wide and she opened her mouth to say something, probably to scold Tim for being inappropriate, but no words came out. Tim continued, oblivious to the bomb he'd just dropped. I mean, I know you're not, but you're nice to me like I think dads are supposed to be nice. You teach me stuff and you listen when I talk and you never act like I'm annoying, so I just wish it, that's all. Jerome crouched down to Tim's level, his heart pounding in his chest. Tim, that's about the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, and I want you to know that I think you're a pretty great kid. Your mom did a real good job raising you, so we can still be friends, even though I said that weird thing? We can definitely still be friends. Always. Tim smiled and went back to checking the tire pressure, satisfied with the answer. But Lisa was looking at Jerome with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was gratitude there and something else. Something that made his pulse quicken. That evening, after everyone else had left and it was just Jerome locking up, Lisa came out of the office where she'd been finishing some paperwork. Jerome, wait, I need to talk to you. He turned, suddenly nervous. If this is about what Tim said, I'm sorry. I didn't put those ideas in his head or anything. I've always been appropriate, I know, Lisa interrupted. That's not what this is about. I know you've been nothing but respectful and kind. She took a breath. I just wanted to tell you that what Tim said today, he meant it. And the thing is, he's not the only one who feels that way. Jerome's heart stopped. What do you mean? I mean that you've been more present in our lives in these past few months than Tim's real father ever was. You've shown up for us in ways I didn't think people did anymore. You fixed my car when I had nothing to give you. You helped me get a job. You've been patient and kind with my son, teaching him things, making him feel important. You've made us both feel like we matter. You do matter, Jerome said quietly. Lisa stepped closer. I know this might be too much, too fast, or maybe completely inappropriate since we work together now. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. She looked up at him, her green eyes reflecting the fading sunlight coming through the shop windows. Do you feel it too? This connection between us? Or am I imagining things because I'm so grateful for everything you've done? Jerome stood there, his mind racing. He thought about the past few months, about how his whole world had shifted since that blue Honda rolled into the shop. He thought about Saturday mornings and homemade sandwiches and a little boy who asked too many questions. He thought about how the loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long had quietly disappeared without him even noticing. You're not imagining it, he finally said. I feel it too. I have for a while now. I just didn't think I had the right to say anything. Lisa smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Why didn't you think you had the right? Because I'm just a mechanic with nothing special to offer. Because you've got enough to deal with without me complicating things. Because I didn't want to mess up the first real friendship I've had in years. Jerome, Lisa said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. You've given us everything. You've given us hope when we didn't have any. You've given Tim a role model when he desperately needed one. You've given me someone I can count on. That's not nothing. That's everything. They stood there in the quiet shop, the weight of unspoken feelings finally acknowledged. Jerome didn't know what came next. He didn't know how to navigate this new territory. But for the first time in his life, he felt like maybe he didn't have to figure it out alone. So what do we do now? He asked. Lisa smiled. I guess we start by being honest about what we want. And what I want is to see where this goes. No pressure, no rush. Just us taking it one day at a time. What do you want? Jerome looked at this woman who had somehow become so important to him, and he realized the answer was simple. I want that too. I want to be part of your lives if you'll have me. I want to keep teaching Tim about engines and having Saturday mornings and coming to work, knowing you'll be there. I want all of it. Then that's what we'll do, Lisa said. We'll take it slow and see what happens. As Jerome finally locked up the shop and walked Lisa to her car, he felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, with people who wanted him there. And for someone who'd spent most of his life feeling like he didn't belong anywhere, that was nothing short of a miracle. The autumn air brought a welcome change to the relentless summer heat. October arrived with cooler mornings and the promise of holidays ahead. For Jerome, life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined 6 months ago. What started with a broken-down Honda had become something he couldn't quite put into words. He and Lisa had been taking things slow, just like they'd agreed. There hadn't been any grand romantic gestures or official declarations. Instead, their relationship had grown naturally, like a plant that finds just the right amount of sunlight and water. They'd grab lunch together during work breaks. He'd help Tim with homework in the evenings while Lisa finished up in the office. On weekends, the three of them would do simple things together, going to the park or grabbing ice cream. It felt right in a way nothing else in Jerome's life ever had. But with that rightness came fear, a deep gnawing fear that it could all disappear. That he'd wake up one day and realize he didn't deserve this happiness. That it was all some temporary gift that would be taken away just like everything else in his life had been taken away. One Friday evening in mid-October, after the shop had closed, Jerome was finishing up some paperwork when he heard a familiar sound. Tim's laughter echoed from the break room, followed by Lisa's voice telling him to calm down before he hurt himself. Jerome smiled. These sounds had become the soundtrack to his days. He walked to the break room and found Tim standing on a chair, trying to reach something on top of the refrigerator while Lisa stood nearby with her hands on her hips. Timothy James. Get down from there right now before you fall and crack your head open. But I can almost reach it. I just need a little more down, now. Tim sighed dramatically and climbed down. That's when he noticed Jerome in the doorway. Jerome, can you reach the top of the fridge? Mom put the good cookies up there and she won't let me have one. Because you already had 2 after dinner and that's your limit. Lisa looked at Jerome with tired eyes. Don't you dare side with him on this. Jerome held up his hands in surrender. I'm staying out of it. This is between you two. Tim slumped into a chair, pouting. Lisa sat down next to him and gently ran her hand through his hair. You know the rules, sweetheart. Too much sugar before bed and you'll be up all night. I know, Tim mumbled. Then he looked up at his mother with those big, thoughtful eyes. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Is Jerome your boyfriend? The question hung in the air like a balloon waiting to pop. Lisa's cheeks flushed pink and Jerome felt his own face getting hot. They'd been so careful around Tim, not wanting to confuse him or move too fast. But kids notice things. They always did. Lisa glanced at Jerome, a question in her eyes. He gave a small nod, leaving the answer up to her. Would it bother you if he was? Lisa asked carefully. Tim thought about this for a moment, his face serious. No, I think it would be really cool, actually. Like really cool. Because Jerome is the best and you're the best, so it makes sense that you'd like each other. Lisa let out a breath she'd been holding. Well then, yes. Jerome and I are together. But we wanted to make sure you were okay with it first. I'm okay with it. Tim jumped up from his chair, suddenly energized again. Does this mean Jerome will come over to our apartment more? Can he come for Halloween? Oh, can he help me with my costume? Jerome laughed, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. Slow down there, buddy. One thing at a time. But you will come for Halloween, right, please? Mom always takes me trick-or-treating, but it would be so much cooler if you came too. Jerome looked at Lisa, who was smiling softly. I'd love to come. If your mom doesn't mind. I definitely don't mind, Lisa said. Over the next couple of weeks, Jerome found himself more integrated into their daily lives. He'd go to their apartment after work some evenings, a small 2-bedroom place that Lisa kept immaculately clean despite working full-time. It was modest but homey, with Tim's drawings covering the refrigerator and photographs lining the walls. The first time Jerome stayed for dinner, he felt oddly nervous. This was different from grabbing lunch at the shop or meeting at the park. This was their home, their private space, and being invited in felt significant. Lisa made spaghetti, and Tim insisted on showing Jerome every corner of the apartment, including his bedroom where toy cars lined the shelves and a poster of different engine types hung on the wall. Mom got me that poster for my birthday, Tim explained proudly. So I could learn all the different kinds. I want to know everything about cars just like you. Something tightened in Jerome's chest. This kid looked up to him. Actually looked up to him. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but it also felt good. It felt purposeful. Dinner was comfortable and easy. They talked about their days, laughed at Tim's jokes that didn't quite make sense, and argued playfully about whether the best pizza topping was pepperoni or sausage. It was ordinary and mundane and absolutely perfect. After Tim went to bed, Jerome and Lisa sat on the small couch in the living room, the television playing quietly in the background. Lisa had her feet tucked under her, a cup of tea warming her hands. Thank you for coming tonight, she said. It means a lot. To both of us. Thanks for having me. I had a really good time. Lisa set her tea down and turned to face him. Jerome, I need to tell you something. And it might scare you off, but I need to say it anyway. Jerome's stomach dropped. Here it comes, he thought. The moment where she realizes I'm not enough. Okay. I'm falling in love with you. The words came out quickly, like she needed to say them before she lost her nerve. I know it's only been a few months, and I know we said we'd take things slow, but that's how I feel. And I needed you to know because I can't keep pretending my feelings aren't as deep as they are. Jerome stared at her, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. You're falling in love with me? Yes, and I understand if that's too much, if you need time or space or... Lisa. Jerome took her hand. I'm falling in love with you too. I have been for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it. Her eyes filled with tears. Really, really. You and Tim, you've changed my whole life. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I was lonely, and I didn't even realize how lonely I was until suddenly I wasn't anymore. You gave me that. You gave me a reason to look forward to tomorrow. Lisa leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and sweet, tasting like the tea she'd been drinking. When she pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. So what do we do now? She asked. I guess we keep doing what we're doing. We keep building this together one day at a time. Halloween came faster than expected. Jerome showed up at their apartment dressed in a simple flannel shirt and jeans, carrying a bag of candy to contribute to their trick-or-treating supplies. Tim answered the door dressed as a mechanic, complete with a toy tool belt and a name patch that read, Tim the Mechanic. Jerome's heart swelled. Look, I'm you for Halloween. Tim spun around to show off his costume. Mom helped me make the name tag and everything. That's the best costume I've ever seen, Jerome said. And he meant it. Lisa emerged from her bedroom wearing cat ears and whiskers drawn on her face. It was his idea. He's been talking about it for weeks. The three of them headed out into the neighborhood as dusk settled over the city. Other families filled the streets, kids running from house to house with pillowcases and plastic pumpkins. Tim held both their hands as they walked, swinging between them like he'd done it 1,000 times before.